What's up, guys? We are here with the 23rd shelf of my wrestling collection. We start off here with a WCW tape, Fall Brawl 98 and a Halloween Havoc 98. This was in the prime of WCW, so both of these were pretty solid watches. Don't have the cover art for them. Then we have World War III 1998. Which was kind of an outrageous, it's too much to really watch at one time with all those people in 3 rings, but you got Wrath versus Glacier leading up to it. Stevie Ray and Conan, not very good. Ernest Miller versus Saturn was okay. Yep, and then you got Kaz Hayashi versus Sonny Ono. Kidman versus Juventud Guerrero, which was a great match. Chris Jericho and Bobby Duncombe Jr. Bret Hart and Diamond Dallas Page was an amazing match, though. Yep, and then you can see all of the people in the Battle Royal. Some big names in there, a lot of enhancement talent. Then we have Starrcade 1998, which is pretty much WCW's WrestleMania. People say this was probably their last great pay-per-view. Scott Hall and Bam Bam Bigelow was really good. Giant and DDP was good. Ric Flair and Eric Bischoff was one of the best storylines going at the time. And then, of course, you got Goldberg versus Kevin Nash, which is the when the stun gun incident happened and Goldberg's streak was ended. Very solid pay-per-view. Love this pay-per-view. Then we have Sold Out 1999. This is obviously after Starrcade. Got Rey Mysterio Jr., Juventud Guerrero, Kidman, and Psychosis, which was a great match. And Perry Saturn and Chris Jericho, which was also a great match. The one thing about WCW is they had an amazing undercard. It's just their main event storylines always kind of lacked. Then you got Ric Flair and David Flair versus Barry Windham and Curt Hennig, which was an amazing match. And then you got Goldberg versus Scott Hall in a ladder match. And Goldberg can't wrestle, so putting him in a ladder match made it even worse. Then you had Bam Bam Bigelow and Wrath. Not the best pay-per-view. This is kind of the start of the downturn of WCW. Then we have Uncensored 1999. Got Booker T and Scott Steiner, which was a great match. Chris Jericho and Saturn with another solid match. Kevin Nash and Rey Mysterio, which was actually a very entertaining match to watch. And this was after Rey Mysterio had lost his mask at Super Brawl. Yep, and then you got Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan, which were... This storyline was kind of over, but WCW never was able to move away from the established main event stars and build their own. That was one of their weaknesses, even with the roster that they had. Then you've got Spring Stampede 1999, which is a lot more solid than Uncensored as far as entertaining show. Got Booker T versus Scott Steiner, which was a good match. Chris Benoit and Dean Malenko, which were a great tag team, versus Raven and Saturn. Amazing match. Bam Bam Bigelow versus Hack, which was okay. Then you got Goldberg versus Kevin Nash, the rematch, finally a few months later, which was kind of dumb. And that was actually a solid match. And then, of course, you got the 4-way for the WCW heavyweight title. Sting, Hogan, Flair, and DDP. With Macho Man Randy Savage as the referee. Hogan gets hurt in this match, which sidelines him. And then they finally put the belt on DDP, which was nice to see someone new be the champion. And they did a lot of great things with DDP. Unfortunately, it just happened for DDP at the downturn of WCW. Then we've got Slamboree 1999. Buff Bagwell versus Scott Steiner, which was not a good match. And then you got the three very solid tag teams, Chris Benoit and Dean Malenko versus Raven and Saturn versus Kidman and Rey Mysterio Jr. And then you got Bam Bam Bigelow versus Brian Knobbs. Bam Bam Bigelow has kind of been relegated to the hardcore scene now. You got Gorgeous George versus Little Nate, Charles Robinson, which was entertaining. Bischoff, shows up, so is Bret Hart. And of course they do nothing with them. Then you got DDP versus Kevin Nash, which was actually a pretty solid match. Not the best pay-per-view, though. Then you've got the Great American Bash 1999. Obviously, it's going to be Kevin Nash versus Macho Man Randy Savage here. Pretty solid match. Got Diamond Dallas Page and Kanyon versus Saturn and Chris Benoit. Then you got Conan and Rey Mysterio versus Kurt Hennig and Bobby Duncombe Jr. Rick Steiner versus Sting. Yep, and then Sid Vicious returns here in WCW in 1999. Not the greatest WCW pay-per-view, but like I said, this is towards the downturn of WCW here. Then you've got Bash at the Beach, 1999. Buff Bagwell versus Roddy Piper, which was horrible. Then you got Conan and Rey Mysterio and the No Limit Soldiers versus the West Texas Rednecks, so it's rap versus country music, basically. Then you got DDP and Bam Bam Bigelow and Kanyon versus Chris Benoit and Perry Saturn. I like how they kind of brought the Freebird things back with the Jersey Triad. Then you got the Junkyard Hardcore Invitational, which was absolutely ridiculous. Yep, then you had the main event, which was Macho Man and Sid Vicious versus Sting and Kevin Nash, and the winner gets the belt, which was weird. So not the best main event there. Then you've got Road Wild 1999, which I thought was a more solid show. This was Eric Bischoff's last pay-per-view in charge before Vince Russo took over. Got Harlem Heat versus Kanyon and Bam Bam Bigelow. Good match. Goldberg versus Rick Steiner, which was a Goldberg squash match. Sting and Sid Vicious was pretty solid. Macho Man versus Dennis Rodman was not good. Even Macho Man couldn't carry Dennis Rodman. Yep, and then you got the returning Hulk Hogan in the yellow and red, because that's going to save WCW, versus Kevin Nash, which was a solid match, but again, they could never get beyond these guys. Then we have the Scott Hall pay-per-view. Or not pay-per-view, documentary, 3-disc documentary here. Very, very solid show on the life of Scott Hall, if you don't know a lot about him, and his battle with drugs and how he, his life before wrestling and all that type of stuff. Worth a watch if you're a big Razor Ramon fan. And then again, if you're a Razor Ramon fan, you got the Click Rules documentary. Goes into the lives of all 5 of these guys. Very, very good documentary here. Then you've got a documentary on Sting, which was also very, very well done. It's a shame WWE never did a lot with Sting. But goes into a lot of his foray into wrestling. Obviously pre-AEW. Then we've got Super Brawl 2000. Now we're in the Vince Russo era, so if you thought 99 was bad, it's about to get worse. Hulk Hogan versus Lex Luger, both way past their prime. Horrible match. Ric Flair and Terry Funk, if you want to talk beyond your prime, Terry Funk's there. Then you got the Mamalukes and Disco Inferno versus David Flair and Crowbar, which was, ridiculous. Yep, and then you got Jeff Jarrett versus Sid Vicious for the title. And I believe Scott Hall's in that match too. Yep, Scott Hall's in the match as well. You know, he'd be there and then he wouldn't be there and then he'd be there. You know, again, battling his drug addictions and divorce and all that type of stuff. So, not a good pay-per-view. I would not go out of your way to watch this unless you're just looking for something to watch that you haven't seen before or you like watching train wrecks. Then you've got Starrcade 1994. Yep, you got Hacksaw Jim Duggan versus Big Van Vader, which was horrible for the U.S. belt. Alex Wright versus Jean-Paul Levesque, or also known as Triple H. Yes, he was in WCW. And that was an okay match. Johnny B. Bad versus Arn Anderson was a classic. Arn Anderson always gave you his best. Harlem Heat versus the Nasty Boys, which was a great tag team match. Mr. T and Kevin Sullivan, horrible. Sting and Avalanche, horrible. Hulk Hogan and the Butcher, even worse. Not a good pay-per-view. Then we got Bash at the Beach 1994. Big Van Vader versus the Guardian Angel, also known as Ray Traylor or the Big Boss Man. Not good. Terry Funk and Bunkhouse Buck versus Dustin Rhodes and Arn Anderson. This is when Arn Anderson turns on Dustin Rhodes. You got Steve Austin versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, which was actually a pretty solid match. Cactus Jack and Kevin Sullivan versus Pretty Wonderful. You know, I'm not a huge Paul Roma fan, but that was a very good tag team. The two of them worked well together. And then you got Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan, which was Hulk Hogan's first match in WCW, and it was okay. Not great, but okay. And then one of my favorite WWE documentaries, the Eric Bischoff story, and just like the Scott Hall documentary, this is worth a watch. If you're a big Downfall and Life of Eric Bischoff fan, or you like his podcast, check this out. And then finally, we have the NXT documentary, From Secrets to Sensation. It goes through all of the top 50 NXT superstars, many of who are no longer with WWE, of course. This is before Triple H obviously took over creative of WWE currently. But it's an okay documentary. That'll do it for this shelf. If you like content like this, please like and subscribe. Your support is much appreciated. I'm also on Letterboxd. The link is over in the profile of this page. Otherwise, until next time, guys.